goes to Andrea Schall from Reuters.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. The Russian government has announced that it will launch a BRICS currency in August, and I wonder if you had a chance to speak with the Chinese about that effort. You've spoken here and in other venues about not wanting to see any countries being forced to choose sides. This particular move would create essentially a parallel currency to the U.S. as the world's reserve currency. Can you that come up in your conversations? And you also talked about the head of the BOC. The Chinese government has not yet announced that he will be taking place. Is it your understanding that Pan will take over as central bank governor? Thank you.
So on the currency issue, I just want to reiterate what I've said in the past, which is I think the United States can rest assured that the dollar is going to play the dominant role in international transactions, facilitating international transactions, and serving as a reserve currency in the years ahead. I don't see that role being threatened by any development, including the one that you've mentioned. I've said previously and would reiterate that because of the role of the dollar and its ability to enable us to implement sanctions, there certainly is motivation in countries around the world to find an alternative. But all the data of which I'm aware shows that the dollar is overwhelmingly close to 90% used in international transactions. And I don't think that there is an alternative that could possibly displace that for the foreseeable future.
This is my video update from Larnaca, Cyprus on this Monday morning, July the 10th. Let's talk about some news, and let's start things off with Janet Yellen's press conference that she gave the other day following her triumphant return from China. And Yellen was asked about the BRICS currency, the plans for a BRICS currency that will rival the USD in international trade. And the reporter asked Yellen if she was worried about this new BRICS trading currency that everyone is talking about. And Yellen told the reporter, no, she is not worried about this BRICS currency. Yellen said that all the studies that she has seen and all the reports that she has looked at point to the fact that the US dollar will remain the dominant currency in trade for many, many decades to come. Yellen actually said that 90% of trade is done in US dollars, and she does not see that changing anytime soon. Transitory inflation. Janet Yellen is not worried about the new BRICS currency. And I don't know if BRICS is going to announce a new currency during their summit in August in South Africa. But the big story here is that the BRICS nations are talking about a currency to rival the US dollar, and that you have 41 countries which have expressed an interest in joining BRICS or have started the process to join BRICS that are openly talking about trade outside of the US dollar. That is the big story, because the collective West and the United States, they cannot do to BRICS what they did to Gaddafi when Gaddafi was talking about creating a gold-backed currency in Africa to trade outside of the US dollar. That is the big story. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and 41 other countries openly talking about moving away from the US dollar. And this doesn't concern Janet Yellen? Nope. Inflation is transitory. Nothing to worry about, according to Janet Yellen. And during this press conference, Yellen actually admitted that the reason that you have the BRICS nations and so many other countries wanting to trade outside of the US dollar and searching for ways to move away from the US dollar was because of sanctions and the weaponization of sanctions. So good job, Joe Biden and Biden White House. In a year and a half, with your stupid sanctions against Russia, you have created a movement of nations looking to move away from the US dollar. That has been the effect of the US and the EU sanctions against Russia. That has been the result of these sanctions. So let's now talk about the Biden White House and Erdogan, because yesterday we had the news that Erdogan actually called up Biden following Erdogan's decision to release the 5 Azov-style NAZI commanders. And we actually have some information from a White House readout as to what Erdogan and Biden talked about. And let me read you some of this White House readout. Drawing attention to Turkey's principled and honest stance concerning the EU membership, President Erdogan said that Turkey wants to rejuvenate the full membership process to the EU and expects a message of open and strong support from the leading EU countries and the EU leadership for Ankara's EU membership during the Vilnius summit. This is what Erdogan discussed with Biden during their phone call yesterday following the release of these Azov-style commanders and his meeting with Elensky. Erdogan, according to this White House readout, wants to revive Turkey's accession talks into the European Union. So, is Turkey pivoting towards the collective West? Is this another indication that behind the release of these commanders is Erdogan's change of direction and desire to move towards the West? And now he is talking about entering the European Union once again? Perhaps this is what this is all about. But I think there's something more to this White House readout and to Erdogan's decision to release the Azov-style commanders. And I think we have to go back to Peskov's statement when these commanders were released, where he said that Turkey is under enormous pressure from the collective West days before the big NATO Vilnius summit, hinting at the fact that Erdogan made these moves in order to relieve some of the pressure that is being placed on him, possibly to buy some time and create some space so that he can continue to walk this tightrope between East and West, and that's why he released these commanders, and that may be why he is calling up Biden and telling Biden that Turkey is really interested in entering the EU. This may be Erdogan's way of trying to relieve some of the pressure as we head into this big Vilnius summit, because Jake Sullivan, he came out with a statement yesterday and he said that the U.S. was in no way, shape, or form involved in Turkey's decision to release these 5 NAZI commanders. And when Jake Sullivan comes out and says that the United States was not involved in this decision, it's the exact opposite. It means that the U.S. was absolutely involved in this decision and absolutely placed pressure on Erdogan to release these Azov-style commanders. So I don't know what's going on here. I don't think anyone knows what's going on here. This very well could be connected to the grain deal. I think it is connected to a certain extent to the grain deal, and we'll know if it is indeed connected to the grain deal come July, I believe July 17th is when the grain deal is up to be renewed. Maybe this is also connected to what's going on in Syria. A lot of people in the comments from my video yesterday noted that Russia is taking out Turkish proxies in Syria. So maybe this was Erdogan's retaliation to what Russia is doing in Syria. Maybe this is indeed a pivot from Erdogan to the West. Maybe he is making a decision and he is choosing Bidenopolis over Putin. Or maybe, just maybe, he is getting a whole ton of pressure from the US days before the big Vilnius summit. And Erdogan said, you know, I need to get these guys off my back. So I'm going to have to make some big concessions, in their eyes, big concessions, because for them, this was a big media PR win. 500 days of the conflict in Ukraine, the NAZI commanders coming back to Ukraine, and a big ceremony, a hero's welcome in Lviv, and boosting Elensky's reputation as this big deal maker, not only to the people of Ukraine but also to the collective West. So no doubt this was staged and orchestrated and well planned, the release of these commanders, and perhaps this was Erdogan's big concession that he had to make to the collective West in order to relieve a lot of the pressure that he is getting from the Biden White House as they head into the Vilnius summit. So it could be one of these things that I've talked about. It could be something else. It could be just Erdogan being Erdogan, the scorpion on the back of the frog. And, why did you sting me, Mr. Scorpion? Now we're both going to drown. And the scorpion's like, well, it's my nature. I'm a scorpion. That's what I do. Erdogan is a wheeler and a dealer, and he plays both sides off against each other, and he likes to walk that tightrope. And maybe this is just Erdogan, doing what he feels he does best. This is in Erdogan's nature to be playing off both sides. So, I think eventually we'll find out what happened in this commando Azov style story. But I can see Erdogan releasing these commanders and Erdogan understanding that for Russia, for what's going on in Ukraine with this proxy war with NATO, releasing 5 guys really makes zero difference for the actual results of the fighting in Ukraine. Yes, it embarrasses, and I don't even know if that's the right word. I used this word yesterday, but I don't know, for lack of a better word, maybe it diminishes Putin a little bit, at least with the hardliners, say, in Russia, who will say that, Putin, once again, he trusted the collective West, or he trusted Turkey, and, he was betrayed. Yes, absolutely. it does do that. But in the grand scheme of things, as I said in my video yesterday, Putin has a whole ton of political capital. He has an approval rating of 90%. So, he can take a 1 or 2% hit in his approval rating. And this doesn't change the trajectory of the conflict in Ukraine whatsoever. And for the collective West, it gives the collective West what it covets the most, what it wants the absolute most, which is the media PR wins. That's what concerns the collective West more than anything else. The optics, the hero's welcome. That's giving the collective West something of tremendous value by releasing these 5 commanders. And so maybe it's Erdogan's way of taking off some of the pressure that he is receiving from the collective West, and him understanding that he's giving the collective West a lot, and he's hurting Russia and Russian-Turkish relations a little. I don't know, just a thought. Could be something else. It could be a lot of different things. But I think we'll find out in the future exactly what was behind this deal. But when I see Sullivan coming out and saying that the U.S. had nothing to do with this and was not involved in this, to me that signals that the U.S. must have been putting a whole ton of pressure on Erdogan to release these guys, because they had this whole heroes welcome thing planned in advance and orchestrated at this exact time, a couple of days before the Vilnius summit, and marking the 500 days of fighting and all of these things. So I think that they really put a lot of pressure on Erdogan to do this. And most likely Erdogan said, you know what, I'll do it if you guys will just get off my back, and I don't have to be harassed by all of you when I travel to Vilnius in a couple of days. Just a thought. So let's talk about the summit. And a couple of days before the summit, the Elensky regime tried to destroy the Kirch Bridge. This is their second go at hitting the Kirch Bridge. The Deputy Defense Minister for Ukraine, Anya Maliar, she actually admitted the other day in a statement that the first strike on the Kirch Bridge was indeed done by the Ukraine military and by the Zelensky regime. So she came out and admitted that. Remember, when they hit the Kirch Bridge the first time, Ukraine denied that it was involved in striking the Kirch Bridge on a state level. They denied that, and up until the Deputy Defense Minister's statement the other day, they continued to deny their involvement in hitting the Kerch Bridge in Crimea. Well, now they have officially admitted it, and they've officially accepted responsibility for the strike on the Kerch Bridge, the first strike. And yesterday, they tried to hit the Kerch Bridge again, but from what I understand, Russian air defense S-400s, they shot down the missiles that tried to hit the Kerch Bridge. And so it looks like they couldn't get their Zaporozhye nuclear power plant false flag going, and they went to plan B. And maybe, just maybe, plan B was the commanders, the Azov-style commanders and the heroes welcome in Lvov, coupled with hitting Crimea and the Kerch Bridge. Maybe that was plan B. And so maybe they got part one of plan B done, which was the heroes welcome, but they couldn't execute on part two of plan B, which was hitting the Kerch Bridge. So the Russians, they repelled the missile strike on Kirch Bridge yesterday. There will probably be more attempts. I mean, we have a full 24 hours plus before the big NATO Vilnius summit. So I would imagine that the Ukraine military is going to try to hit at the Kirch Bridge again, perhaps, and maybe they're hoping that something gets through. I could definitely see the Elensky regime trying really hard to hit Crimea or hit the Kerch Bridge while he's actually at the NATO meeting. That would bring a whole lot of joy to all of the NATO members if they manage to strike at Crimea and Russia while they're meeting in Vilnius. So there still is some time for some sort of terrorist strike towards the Kirch Bridge or towards Crimea. But I wonder what the collective West supplied to Ukraine in order for them to try and hit the Kerch Bridge. It had to have been Storm Shadow missiles. I was reading the update blog post, the Substack post from Simplicius the Thinker, and he showed the distances involved in hitting the Kerch Bridge and how the Ukraine military could hit the Kerch Bridge, given the fact that they're pretty far removed from this area. And the only logical conclusion is that they must have fired off their Storm Shadow missiles that the UK provided them. And so if Storm Shadows were used to try and hit the Kerch Bridge, I imagine that in the next couple of days, the Russian military will hit a collective West decision-making center. That's what's going to happen if they do conclude that Storm Shadows were used. Well, according to the Russian Ministry of Defense, the statement they made a couple of weeks ago, every time the collective West and the Elensky regime attack Russian territory using collective West weapons, well, the Russian military takes out a command center. So expect a command center to be annihilated, to be demolished in the next couple of days. And expect a lot of mercenaries, foreign mercenaries, and NATO commanders to perish in an eventual Russian strike on a command center. And they know, and the Russians know, where these command centers are located. So things are going to heat up because of this failed missile strike against the Kerch Bridge. So Politico is reporting that 24 hours before the big Vilnius meeting, the US, Germany, and France, they're in a bit of a panic, and they're working round the clock to figure out what they're going to give Ukraine so that this can make a really big impact at the NATO conference in Vilnius. And they're trying to figure out the messaging and the package that they're going to offer Elensky at the NATO summit. And it looks like it's going to be some sort of Israel style of support, which I have said in a previous video is actually no different than what Ukraine is getting now, which is infinite. Well, in their mind, they believe an infinite supply of weapons, but we know that's not true. An infinite supply of weapons and an infinite supply of money. Now, the infinite supply of money, you know, they're printing the money, so in their minds, they believe that the money is infinite, but it's actually finite. Anyway, it looks like that's going to be the result of the big NATO summit. It is going to be an Israeli style of support for Ukraine for as long as it takes, and the US Germany, France, I believe the UK as well. According to Politico, they're trying to put together the exact package and the wording and the messaging that they're going to use for the announcement of this support for Ukraine during the NATO summit. You see, it's all about optics. It is all about optics. The collective West, they can't go into this NATO summit accepting reality. They just can't do it. They're going to have to come up with some sort of spin, and they're going to brand this some sort of package. You watch, they'll give this package some sort of name. The NATO Ukraine military defense package or something like that. The MDP, the military defense package of NATO and Ukraine. So they'll come up with some sort of spin, and they'll put all the necessary marketing that they need to put into it, and they'll contact all of the collective West journalists to write up the stories, and that's how they're going to push this thing through. You know, this whole conflict started with Ukraine entering NATO. That's what caused this entire conflict, or one of the major causes of this entire conflict. It has always been about NATO expansion, and Ukraine was the red line for Russia. And for the last 10 years, Russia has been saying that Ukraine is the red line. And here we are now, 24 hours away from the NATO meeting with Ukraine, where Ukraine will not get membership into NATO, but they're going to be offered something else, something different. Because the collective West cannot accept that Russia's major red line was about to be crossed, and Russia acted. And it makes you think, makes you wonder, if Russia did not act on the possibility of Ukraine entering NATO, say Russia did not launch the special military operation a year and a half ago, tomorrow in Vilnius, would we be seeing Ukraine as a full member of NATO? I'd say yes. I'd say yes. I think that would absolutely happen. If there was no special military operation, if Russia did not act in the way that they did with Ukraine because of the threat of NATO expansion, I believe that in Vilnius tomorrow, NATO would have been offered, Ukraine would have been offered membership in NATO, and that would have been quite scary and quite dangerous for the entire world, because Russia would have then had to would then be faced with dealing with Ukraine as a full member of NATO. That would have been what would have been ahead for Russia. They would have had to deal with a full NATO membership of Ukraine. Just a thought there. So the former Secretary General of NATO, Mr. Anders Rasmussen, he actually floated the idea of admitting Ukraine into NATO, but admitting Ukraine into NATO piece by piece. Quite an interesting proposal from the former Secretary General. And this guy is a big-time warmonger, Mr. Rasmussen. He's very much aligned with the military-industrial complex, but his plan for Ukraine and NATO is not to go the way of Israel-style agreements with NATO and Ukraine, but his plan is to allow bits and pieces of Ukraine into NATO. It's almost like Rasmussen is accepting the fact that Ukraine will be broken up and will be divided. That's what it is. At least that's how it sounds to me. You have the former Secretary General of NATO coming out and saying, Ukraine is lost. It's going to be divided and broken up either way, so we might as well start admitting some of the pieces of Ukraine, the rump state of Ukraine that's going to be a reality in the future. Start admitting them into NATO now. That's kind of what Rasmussen is saying in this statement. And so France, they also came out with a statement. I believe the foreign minister of France came out with a statement, and France said that they're going to really ramp up the military aid to Ukraine. And the Russian foreign ministry, they replied to the French foreign minister. They were very, very annoyed and upset with France's statement, where they said that they're going to provide a whole lot more weapons and money to the Zelensky regime so that they can continue to fight Russia. And I thought, in a video I made a couple of days ago on Macron and the fires in France, and I joke around about how the way the collective West leaders, when they're faced with a crisis, like the way Macron can deal with the fires in France and the crisis in France, is to just give more money and weapons to Ukraine, and that's his solution to dealing with the problems in France. I say that in a joking way, but it's kind of true, isn't it? I mean, France has so many problems. So many problems are plaguing the French people and France as a country. And what's their way of dealing with these problems? To give more money and weapons to Ukraine. So, I say these things joking. I'm joking about these things when I say, how do you solve the crisis in France, or how do you solve the problems in the Netherlands? Well, just give more money to Elensky. How do you solve Germany's recession problem? Give more money to Elensky. I'm joking, but there's a lot of truth to that. So Elensky, since we're speaking about the Ukraine president, he's wrapping up his charm offensive tour, because he's got to run around Europe and talk to the collective West media to charm them into giving his regime more weapons and more money and more support. And he's wrapping things up with his interview to ABC News. And Elensky said a lot of interesting things during this interview to ABC News. He said that the U.S. taxpayer should absolutely give more money to Ukraine. When I think it was Martha Radish, I believe is her name, the journalist who was interviewing Elensky, when she asked Elensky, what do you say, Mr. President, about the fatigue in the U.S. for giving more money and more aid to Ukraine and stuff like that? Elensky was like, look, I'm very thankful for all the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions that the U.S. taxpayer has given my regime and helped me buy many homes. And all of this unaudited money that has vanished. I'm very thankful to the U.S. taxpayer for giving me $300 billion of unaudited U.S. dollars, which has made me and my generals and my administration super duper wealthy rich. Thank you very much. But give us more money. That was pretty much what he told ABC. So yeah, he's like, we need more money. It's never enough, is what he told the ABC reporter. It's never, ever enough. So he said that during this interview with ABC. He also took a bit of a jab at Trump when the reporter asked him about Trump's statements that he could end this conflict in 24 hours Elensky's reply to Trump was, well, you were president for 4 years and you didn't do anything then, so, why do you think you could do something now? That was pretty much Elensky's reply to that one. And there was an admission during this interview that if the U.S. did stop giving Zelensky money, then yes, the conflict would wrap up in 24 hours. But Zelensky was like saying, Trump, you talk a big game, but there's no action behind your words. That's pretty much what Zelensky said about Trump. But Zelensky did admit in his reply to this question that Ukraine was at war with the Donbass for many, many years, because Zelensky said that we, as Ukraine, were at war with Donbass when Trump was president, and Trump didn't do anything then to stop the conflict. So why would he do anything if he were to become president? So I thought that was an interesting statement, a kind of admission from Zelensky that Ukraine was indeed attacking the Donbass during the years when Trump was in office. What else did Zelensky say? Okay, Zelensky said that the grand plan of the big counteroffensive is to get to the borders of Crimea and to then threaten Putin with an attack on Crimea if he did not capitulate. So he pretty much said what the Washington Post reported on when they did that report on CIA Director Burns' visit to Kiev, that the plan that Burns saw in early June was a big counteroffensive, 5 days to reach the Sea of Azov, and then moving all of the artillery and the HIMARS and the Storm Shadows to Ukraine's position next to the borders of Crimea, and then basically telling Putin, if you don't surrender, if you don't capitulate now, well, then we're going to start shelling Crimea. And Elensky told ABC News in the interview yesterday that that is indeed the plan. Now, I don't know what kind of strategists the Zelensky regime has, or the collective West has, when they're thinking up these grand plans to achieve victory against Russia. But if this was indeed the plan, and Burns has said that was the plan, the Washington Post reported that this was indeed the plan, and Elensky yesterday said this was indeed the big strategy behind this big counteroffensive. If that is indeed the case, then this plan sounds pretty stupid. I have to admit, this sounds like a really, really dumb plan. We're gonna make it to the Sea of Azov in 5 days, move all of our HIMARS and our Storm Shadows to the border of Crimea, and then we're going to tell Putin, surrender or else. and they don't take into consideration that whatever artillery and weapons Ukraine has, the Russians have like 100 times more, and they don't take into consideration that Russia's military is 100 times more powerful, and that Putin would do whatever he had to do in order to protect Crimea. They don't take any of these things into consideration, and I'm sure I'm missing a whole lot of other actions that Russia would take if they ever felt that Crimea was in serious danger. But this was the plan. This is what you guys were running with. This was the big goal of this counteroffensive. This was it, to threaten Crimea with missile strikes if Putin didn't capitulate, which would lead to Putin capitulating to this type of scheme, would absolutely lead to his downfall and regime change. Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, Putin is on record, Medvedev is on record, Lavrov is on record, Shoigu on record, everyone in the Russian government is on record saying that if there is ever any threat to Russian territory, of which Crimea is Russian territory, then believe me, you would feel the real Russian military, like the true power of the Russian military. And so this is just an absolutely stupid plan. This was a really, really dumb plan. And Zelensky saw this plan, and NATO commanders saw this plan, and Burns saw this plan, and Lloyd Austin saw this, and Blinken saw this. This is what you guys decided to run with. This was it. So anyway, let's, I think I'm gonna wrap up the video there. I can do some clown worlds. I've got 3 clown worlds that I could talk about, but you know, let me just list them off, because I think this video is running a bit long. So let me list off these 3 clown worlds. Netherlands Miss Universe. Okay, I'll just leave it there. Biden at the beach. Okay, I'll leave that one there. And the NAFO conference in Vilnius. And Kaya Kallas speaking to the NAFO guys and gals, the fellas as they call themselves. No comment. I'll just leave that one there as well. And there's a reason, and I'll leave it on this note. There's a reason that Kaya Kallas addressed the NAFO fellas. And people in the comments, you'll know what I mean. All right, everybody. That is the video, the Duran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, ODYSEE, BitChute, and Telegram, and go to the Duran shop. 10% off, free Assange, free Pablo Gonzalo, free Gonzalo Lira, free Gonzalo Lira, 10% off, Duran shop. Use the code Good Day. Take care.